In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Glory to you, O God, glory to you, O Heavenly King, Comforter, the Spirit of truth, everywhere present and filling all things, treasury of good things and giver of life. Come and dwell in us and cleanse us from every stain and save our souls, O good one. All right, I will share my outline for today, so you can take a look. Last time we did webinar 3, we started by looking at the website, the DCS, and we identified various objects and things that happen. We talked about that the calendar of services is driven by date. We said there were cycles that are handled by what's called the liturgical day properties engine, which I've got down here to remind us. And then we use service templates of a particular date in order to record and encode the rubrics for that day in any instance that could possibly happen on that date, like Sunday, weekday, Saturday, or a particular day of the movable cycle. And we talked a little bit about logic within templates, and we're going to continue that because we ran out of time. So just as a review, the liturgical day properties are the built-in sort of engine that the program uses to calculate certain things. And I'm going to have Michael share his screen now for posterity's sake. We'll be watching these videos and to show us the list of those. So Michael, if you want to narrate that part.
Yes. So I always like to mention that this part of the code was written by John Holder at St. Catherine's Greek Orthodox Church in Denver, Colorado. And it's at the heart of everything for a service, for a template that is for a specific date. And so it calculates all of the liturgical properties for the date that is set in the topmost template when the generator runs. And there are certain, for example, this is in Voxas where we're showing it now. So in Voxa, we actually have a tool where you can check the date. You can put the date in and see what the properties are. And some of those properties are actually used in the template. So in ALWB, in that template language, the atem language, it begins with a keyword when. So like when day of week is such and such. And those same properties are available in Vox as well. So you can control the flow, the logic in a template based on a date, the day of the week, the Eothanon number, the Lucan cycle day number, the mode of the week number, movable cycle day number, the date of the Sunday after the elevation of the cross, the number of Sundays before the Triodian in the year. It also calculates the dates for the various feasts. Of course, some of them are fixed dates, but others are dependent on when Pascha occurs. And it also calculates for each day of the Triodian what the actual date is. So if the service falls on a date that's within the movable cycle, it knows what day of the movable cycle it is. So that's pretty much what happens with the LDP. Anything else you want to cover on that, Father?
Just that the relative IDs use this that engine to get their value depending on what that key, what the ID is. So if a relative ID of RID begins with ME, it will use the date. The date information.
Right.
And then find that key in the date the date that is that the template is running on. If something is has a rid of DA, meaning day of the week, then it will use the day of the week information property. If it similarly, if it begins with EO, if it's like then it's looking for one of the 11 weeks of the Elthinon cycle. The Lucan cycle day, we'll talk about that later. That is used in the lectionary and deciding which Bible reading to use of the week of Luke. The next one, mode of week, when the rid is from the Oktoichos, it was the OC, and then that signals it to go to find anything in the mode of the week and the day of the week. Because the Oktoichos has those two things, the mode and then the day, and then the key of it. Movable cycle means 1 through 127 of Triodion and Pentecostarion, and so that if it sees a TR, a key beginning with TR, it will look in the movable cycle. And just for the also, if it sees the keys beginning with PE, it will look in the movable cycle. So there's one continuous movable cycle from 1 to 127, but in order to imitate the structure and organization of the liturgical books, we've separated the keys so that 1 through 71 are in the TR library, and then 71 through 127 are in the Pentecostarion. But there's one continuous numbering of days. And then back to the list. Again, the Sunday after the elevation of the cross is used in calculating gospel readings. The Sundays before Triodion is also used to calculate gospel readings. And the year is used to calculate what day of the week a particular date is on. We can't just say, by default, the template will run in the current year, but we can make it run in whichever year. So we could manually hard code it to say February 23rd, 2020, and then it would calculate what day of the week it was, what mode of the week it was, and all the other liturgical day properties. So that year is important in that sense. So that's the LDP liturgical day properties engine. I thought today we should go through a service template now and start drilling down and seeing how everything is organized, how everything works, because it becomes very complex. There are many details and movable parts and things that I have chosen in creating the DCS to display for the convenience of the users, and all those things required keys and values in order to be able to display those things. And so we're going to see where all that stuff is. In the case of, for example, another jurisdiction, or whatever we want to call it, like, in Guatemala or the Church of, the Archdiocese of Mexico or whatever it is, you may decide to display or not display other things. And so some of these functions and things may not be useful to you. But in any case, you can create new things that you might need to know. If there's a regular cycle of which church or chapel something is going to take place, you can, probably create, an algorithm or something that would display, which church or chapel or missionary location, something is going to happen on any given day of the week or whatever it is. So all things are doable programmatically. So I will now share the ALWB. All right. You see that? All right. So this is, I chose the Vespers service for January 29th of this year because it does not fall within the movable cycle, and it will be just much simpler to show you a Vespers template that is not complicated by the fact that it is part of the Triodion. This is the very important line in the template. It simply states the date. Now, all those liturgical date properties, will calculate on the basis of that date. By the way, if I put this screen there, do you see yourselves now on the shared screen or not? You do? Okay. I should move you off then. Okay. All right. As I said before, this, and these lines of code have to do with PDF generation, so we're not going to talk about those right now. Right here, this. So I will just collapse those, and I will collapse the head. So now we begin with the logic. We're just going to go line by line. Stop me when you have a question. And the logic begins. It is we know from the Typicon that January 29th, it is possible for January 29th to coincide with the first day of the Triodion. Therefore, we have to provide for that instance. And so that's why the first line of code says when the movable cycle is 1, use, and then it says insert the template that is specially built for the Sunday of the Publican and the Pharisee. January 29th, the saint on January 29th, the commemoration on January 29th is not one of those that would be celebrated together with the Publican and the Pharisee, and therefore none of the other lines of code in this template would run once it hits this. When movable cycle is 1, then do this, and then that would be the end of this template. But in this case, it doesn't fall on the first Sunday of the Triodion, so we go to the otherwise. So otherwise,
Father Seraphim?
Yes.
Sorry, could you collapse everything after line 43? It would just be interesting to see. Okay, yeah, exactly. Yeah. It just confirms what you were saying that
So this is probably
if it is movable cycle day number 1,
right.
then that's the only code that would be used, that insert right there. Okay.
Right.
Thanks.
So does that illustrate it better?
Yeah. I supposed that's what it would look like, but I just thought it'd be nice to see. Thanks.
All right, so now let's follow this down. Otherwise, when name of day is Sunday, use, and yes, it is a Sunday. So let's expand that. Now, I went through recently and named the instances like instance _ Sunday. They used to be instance 01 or instance 02. And I decided to scrap that convention and to call them by what they really are. So hopefully all the dated templates now, their instances will say instance Sunday, instance Saturday, if it's a different rubric, and instance weekday. And that's what that stands. But that's just a naming convention that I selected. So it's going to run this section of code, but not anything after it. Okay, you understand that? So the first line in this, and in almost any service, is an insert section, and it's going to insert something from those blocks that I told you about. These are the building blocks of the services. So here in the templates project, we have blocks or groups of code that are named, and ST, someone will have to write this and document this. ST stands for service title. So if you remember in the digital chant stand, the top part, let's see, okay. You see my digital chant stand open? So this part here, and possibly this is what's handled by that line of code called ST and then something, all right? It gives us the book information. It gives us what chapters and sections or parts, of the liturgical books and the name of the service. That's what I call service title. And because those are used over and over again, I created that repository of service title, groups of code sections. And so let us open that, and it's over here. Okay. So this is the service title. Service titles. Now I've collapsed everything so that you can see here. You probably can recognize by the abbreviations that it's organized by kinds of services that could potentially need a title. CO stands for comp line. GC stands for great comp line. GH stands for great hours, hour 6, hour 9, Holy Week, liturgy, matins. MO is midnight office. PL is pre-sanctified liturgy. SV is small vespers. YNP is typica with no priests, which gained popularity during the pandemic. We don't really offer that anymore. VE is for vespers, and VL is for vesperal liturgy. Okay, the reason I created a different way of saying that so that we could probably put the word vesperal liturgy instead of just vespers, as the title of the service, or comp line or great comp line or whatever. So let's look at the one that is pointed to here. So ST vespers. So let's go to STVE. All right. Look at that. Look at how many different options we have here. So my shorthand means when it's vespers from the Minaeon, when it's vespers and all it uses is the Minaeon, not the Oktoikos, not the Triodion, but say some saint, like Saint John Chrysostom's feast day, all it uses is the Minaeon, then we would use this block. If it's this one here, which says section M1, that means it's Minaeon and the first commemoration of the Minaeon, because the Minaeon can have like two commemorations going on in the same service. Saint so and so and Saint so and so. We have we know those. Let's look specifically at the one we're using. This one says STVEME1. You can probably conjecture what that means. It means it's the service title for Vespers when we use the Oktoikos and the first commemoration from the Minaeon. So let's open that specific one. So we're going to look at this section, which was just invoked right there, OCM1. And that tells us, if you're looking at if you open the DCS on a second screen somewhere, if you would, and go to January 28th and the Vespers at the bottom, then you'll see this. So I don't have to keep switching screens. But where it says books-sources, that is exactly this. In Greek, vivlia pie, okay? Books and sources. That's this line of code right here. So we used paragraph, and then in order to give it the kind of formatting that I want, in order to assign it to a style in the CSS, we say role, and we have a list of roles. So let's go to that. Here is a file called roles. And when we invoke roles, we can then put any one of these names of a role, and it will pair that paragraph with the style in the CSS. Michael, please, if I say something in the wrong way, I'm trying to express myself, but if I use the wrong terminology, please chime in so that, once the document.
Sure.
Right.
It might be useful to open up the CSS file and,
Yep.
pick the one that formats the bibliography.
Yeah. So in order to do that, we go to a website. Well, we can go to the assets. All right, here's our CSS that gives style, to the DCS. So let's go here. We had, all right, we have a role called service sources title. So let's go to the CSS. All right, service sources title. Here is the entry in the CSS for service sources title. It says padding, text align left, font family serif, font size 90, font weight bold. And that's what we see. Bold black, left justified. That's where it got that from. Okay. All right. Then we have the next line or next paragraph. It says para role service sources, and then the names of the books, Oktoichos, and what mode of the Oktoichos, mode Plego 4. So let's find service sources. Service sources, it's another role, and in the CSS, it's here, service sources. So in that case, we have what you see on the website, where it's padded left 25 pixels, but left aligned a little bit smaller, 80%. It's red and it's bold. Okay, that's where we got that. So far, so good. Where is the book Oktoichos name? So notice this is a specific ID. So it's pointing to somewhere in the library in all the languages now. It has to say Oktoichos or whatever we call it in English or whatever we call it in Spanish or whatever language. So we can see that from the drop down here, not the drop down, but the
pop-up,
that the resource is actually the file miscellanea, and there it's the Greek, thing. So we can go there, and this is the miscellanea file that has all kinds of things like how we're going to call the modes. We're going to call it mode 1, tone 1, how are we going to call the odes, and then various even punctuation stuff, which probably won't be in books. So here we have a whole set of all the books, and so when we want to invoke the name of the book of the Oktoichos, we have a way to do it. We just say that key miscellanea book Oktoichos name of the Oktoichos. All right, that's that. And then I needed a hyphen, and so that again is in the miscellanea, and I just created I needed keys for all those things to be able to do that. There might be a more efficient way, and maybe Doxa will do it in a different way. But in order to get,
you can. It's you have SIDS and RIDS, there's a new one called NID, no ID, NID, and you
Gotcha.
just put a literal value in there.
Gotcha. A literal value in a template.
Yeah, right in the template, you can put any literal string of characters you want.
Which would appear exactly that string in every language. So I mean,
Exactly. So you don't want to put a language, an actual word. It's more like symbols and things,
gotcha.
numbers.
Yeah. All right. So there's our hyphen. And then how do we know, we said it's the Octoechos, which chapter or section of the Octoechos book? Because we know it's divided into 8 sections. Well, that would depend on the mode of the week, right? It happens to be Plagal Fourth, which would be the 8th mode. But how do we invoke that? We could invoke it in any number of ways, but the way I did it here was to use a relative ID. And I say, all right, on the basis of the date, January 29th, 2023, the mode of the first Vespers stichera would be the mode of the week. I could also say the mode of the second stichera, or the mode of the Apolitikion, or the mode of any of those hymns that would be on, the Sunday, the first day of the week, of the mode of the week. But I chose that particular one because I know that no matter what, that would give me the mode of the week. And that would be the case on whatever day of the week it was, because every day of the week in the Octoechos at Vespers begins with a stichera 1, and that sticheron 1, we can go there. Sticheron 1 not only has mode, it's got Greek melody, it's got the text. Okay, so that's how I know that I'm going to get the mode of the week, and that's why it appears on the website. Not only of the mode of the week, we want to know what section of the mode of the week. So that section is divided into days, right? Month, Sunday, Saturday night, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. Get it to say on the website on Saturday evening, here's a line of code. It's inserting a section. So let us drill down. Where is that section? It might be right in this same template, but further down. So I'm going to click on it. Actually, it's taking us to a thing called a selector. So here's the selector service title. This gives us the opportunity to introduce the idea of selectors. So in addition to this set of blocks that we've seen, and we're using ST now, there's another set of templates that do things that I've called selectors. And now they are going to use the liturgical day properties and other things and the logic that's in there in order to return very specific other information, not just the day of the week, but something that is connected to the day of the week, or something that is connected to the mode of the week. So here, so it's on evening before. Why do we need this? Well, it says that the date of the service, as far as the Mineon is concerned, and as far as the liturgical date properties are concerned, is January 29th. But the Vespers service actually takes place on January 28th, on the evening of January 28th. So how can I say that? And here's how I do it. On evening before, so I have when. The name of the day is Sunday, and that's the case here. January 29th is a Sunday. Then I want it to say on Saturday evening. Okay. All right. So how do I do that? So we go here on Sunday, para-roll service source section. So that's another role. It's another style here, paragraph style. All right. And then the SID will say Posavato esperas, and in English, on Saturday evening. So these are SIDs, but they are dependent on the day of the week that I'm using the liturgical day property and then returning a very specific string for each day. So where is this on Saturday? Let's click to it. It's in the file in each language, in each version, one of those constants called titles. It's a grouping of things that are used, bits and pieces, or whole titles, or bits and pieces that are used in titles, much like this. So here there's something called on Saturday. And so when we want to say on Saturday in every language, that's where we would put it. There are other things in this titles thing, like this is Stihira from the Mineon, Stihira of Pascha, Stihira, anything that's like a title before something or that functions as a title. But in this case, we have a title called on Saturday, and then another one, evening, so that we concatenated together becomes on Saturday evening. Now, that was my philosophy. That was my choice to do it that way, so that I had, names of days and then morning or evening or whatever. Someone else might organize their library in a much different way and just say the actual title is on Saturday evening, and I'm going to have a whole title called on Saturday evening, and I'm not going to put two keys next to each other. I'm just going to have the one. That is entirely, up to you, but this is how I did it. And then by extension, we have, if the day of the week is Monday, I want you to show on Sunday evening, and so forth. Not if you understand. Okay. So that is a selector, that service title selector. And one of those things there is on evening before, and that's what I did. That's how I managed that part. And that's why you see Octoechos mode plego fourth, and under it on Saturday evening, because that is a section of the chapter of mode plego 4 where it says it's an actual title on Saturday evening, and it gives you Saturday Vesper stuff. And then the next section will be on Sunday morning at midnight office, and the next one will be on Sunday morning at matins, and the next one will be just what the book has. So we have to have a way of indicating that. All right, then if you look at the DCS, the next line says Mineon, January 29th, and that is done here, para, roll. All right, much like we had the services sources and the SID book Octoechos name, now we just have the same thing, but it's SID book Mineon name. Okay, and I want to say which volume of the Mineon is it? There's 12 volumes of the Mineon, and so I give it a hyphen, and now I use the RID here, MEDA date. So it means give me this key DA date from the Mineon on this particular date. So if we drill to so this is where it's going to go. It's going to go to this line in whichever language. It's going to find January, for whatever the date of the year, the date is January 29th. And that's the information that this key called MEDA date gives. It always gives the month and the day, not the year, because that changes from year to year. But it's always January 29th is always January 29th. And so that's how we can invoke that. It can also be invoked using the liturgical day property with month and day and year and whatever. There are ways of doing that as well. But I do know that every day in the Mineon, every Aries file, every file in the Mineon, which represents a date in the Mineon, has this useful information that I can leverage. And so that's what that is. And so that's why we have Mineon-January 29th. That was that. The next line there is it says transfer of the relics of Saint Ignatius the God-bearer. Now, where did that come from? Well, that's this line. All right, we have para, role, services, source, section. So let's go see that. That is another role that corresponds to services source section. All right, much like the Saturday evening, it's the same style. And we ask it to give us a RID ME, so that means from the Minaon, from the date of the Minaon, give us the value of the key for MEDA commemoration first short. That's the name of the key. So let's go to that. All right. That key, there it is. There's the information it got from that key. And it gives us exactly that, transfer of the relics of Saint Ignatius the God-bearer. That's where that comes from. All right. Why do I have first short and a different one called first? Well, there are some commemorations that are super long, like 2 or 3 lines long, in order to indicate and define what the commemoration is. And sometimes that's okay for the actual book of the Minaon, but in little information here, I just want to give the users of the DCS the main idea of what it is. You know, it's like memory of St. George instead of memory of the holy and God-bearing great, great glorious, great martyr, George the trophy bearer, blah, blah, blah. Okay, that's appropriate for the beginning of, the book of the Minaon, but here, I just want something short. Oftentimes, the short version and the regular version are the same, but in order to have the ability to do a short version, I have to have a separate key for short version. Not if that makes sense.
Father, I actually have a question about this.
Yes.
I received from our Metropolitan the phrasing that he wants to use for the Minaon commemorations.
Okay.
And I was trying to fill out these keys, sort of, looking at the entire Minaon and filling them all out at once. But that's when I discovered exactly this, that there are multiple keys used. I discovered the full, first short, second short, all of these things. And I was just wondering, in your opinion, if I guess I ended up deciding that I wouldn't necessarily just fill them all out from the very beginning, since there are several different keys. But which one of these is most used? Typically in templates, is it the commemoration.full, or would it be like first short? Which one would be most important to fill out in our database?
I would say all out. And if you don't know whether you're allowed to use short, put the long one in both. Otherwise, some of your templates will be blank there if there's no value. Or if you never want to use short, then, go in and change the template title, templates, and never use, the short, the one or the, I think I always use short. I would suggest that until you know how you want, whether you can or how you want to do a short version of the commemoration for purposes like this, fill them both in with the long, so you don't get in trouble with your bishop.
Or the short could point to the first, a redirect.
That's true,
Mm-hmm.
but
Father Seraphim, so if we're looking at the title section of any given generated service, what key usually appears there? Would it be full, or would it be first?
Well, so it depends. If full, then it means that both, if there's two, then both commemorations are being used.
Oh, okay, I see. So it's dependent on what is actually called for in terms of the variable materials for that service.
Correct. So that if there is two saints that on a weekday are both celebrated, but when it falls on a Sunday, you only do the first one, that Sunday one would have a different service title, section.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Okay. It
So
does make sense.
Yeah. Like in the case of January 29th, you'll see here that there is no second commemoration. So this, second title and second name are blank because there is no second commemoration on that day. All right. So, but all the files have the same keys just to make them, it was easier to do that than to comment out, keys that aren't used.
Okay.
And since we're here, there is a key called first name. And that was specifically for example, when I was making the megalinaria for all the parishes in the GOA, I had to have a way to say the saint's name in Greek in the nominative, like Agios Georgios, right? And then Saint George, so that when I put a list of, Saint George, Megalinaria, Saint George, Saint Constantine, Saint whatever, it was, I could do that, but I couldn't do it with the existing keys because most of them were in genitive, because in Greek, it's like, the memory of Saint George. In English, it will, doesn't make a difference. So that particular key had a specific purpose. And when you come up with specific purposes that aren't foreseen here, you have two options. You can either repurpose an existing key that you don't need, or you just create a new key and use it throughout your system. Because at some point, your libraries and your templates will not be mine. Correct? Probably. If at any time, you think your Matin services and Vesper services and your libraries will be different from what the GOA uses, then, you branch off and then, you'll have your own keys and stuff like that. Are we good there?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. All right, so let's see where we have. All right, so that's how I got first short. And why do I use first short here? Well, that's because in this particular case, this particular section is called OCM1, which means OCME1 means the first commemoration from the Mineon. And because it's being used in this title section, I only want the short version of it. And that's why we have short here, okay? And then after that, if you see there's a solid line, and that's horizontal line here, the key. And then I give a line break. And that's especially useful in the PDF files because it was just everything was just crunched. And then I have this line here that says that's where you get the name Vespers or Sperinos, now at the top to begin the service. And that name comes from we have a title. Okay. So title by default means it's going to be centered. And I think that's all it means. It's going to be centered. And here we have, instead of a role, we have these, Michael, what do we call these? These are, again, in that same file, these are tags. Okay, these are not roles, but they're tags. So when we put something in those, they're not brackets.
Yeah, they're tags, but they're really CSS.
Cool. Yeah.
Actually, those are CSS properties.
Correct.
Right. So it's not actually a CSS class name, it's actually applying certain properties to the CSS
Okay. So
class.
yeah, B means bold. BNR means bold and red. The N stands for and. Okay. BNR is bold and red. So BNI means bold and italics. INR would be italics and red. B and I and R means bold and italics and red, and so forth. You know, I italics, R red, S smaller. I and BL means italics and black. BL is black. So we created these. We made these up, and then we made sure that they align with a style in the style sheet. So that you can put it in the template. Where are we? ST. It has to exist in the system. You know, it has to be on that list. Because if I were to make this BR, I don't know, and B, it puts an error. So I don't find this. You don't have this defined somewhere. So as you can see, it flagged it as an error, right? So it's got to be somewhere. B and R. So it means it's going to say this key in bold, this key in bold and red. So where do I find that? VE HTML. All right, this is a file that's in every language. It is in the properties folder. So it kind of has the character of what is a property or appropriate to this particular language to make it function correctly, and you know, whatever. So you're going to have to do this in Spanish. Now, where did these? So we have Vespers Vespers HTML tab, Vespers PDF header, Vespers PDF cover. We could make whatever we wanted. It's called Vespers HTML tab here because that's what would appear on the tab, you know, in your browser. You know, when you open a service, or if you open it, I think at one time, you know, the tab of that service would say what's going to be on that tab. It says Vespers. That's for HTML. PDF header is how do I want to say it in a PDF header? There might be a different way or a different, you know, uppercase, lowercase, whatever. And then how do I want to say it in a Vespers on a PDF cover? I don't want to just say Vespers. I want it a little bit more formal. And I say the service of Vespers. There's got to be somewhere in the library where those strings are so that I can use them when I want to. If we had, you know, some other kind of publication or whatever, you know, we wanted to say it, service of the Archdiocese of you know, America for Vespers or something like that. We would have to create another key to be able to have that string, you know, so that we can invoke that key. So I created these, and so I'm able to leverage them and use them. And in this case, I decided that I would use, even though it says called the tab key, I mean, I use it here because that's how I want it to look. That's what I wanted. Any questions? All right. So now we've done the first, you know, like, you know, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 paragraphs, you know, in a Vespers file. And that was all accomplished with that line of code. You see that? All right. It is 4:21. We will now go to the next insert section. All right. Let's. All right. Our next thing is Vespers. So let's open the Vespers block. Now this has divided Vespers into 12 sections. The beginning, everything from the beginning, from Blessed is our God, until we get to Lord, I have cried. The Lord, I have cried section is Lord, I have cried, and any verses that come after it. And then we have section 3, which is all the stichirat that come after Lord, I have cried, whatever those might be. Middle stands for whether there's an entrance, a no entrance, gladsome light. Section 5 is readings. If there are Old Testament readings, they are, invoked through that line. There's the various litanies that come after. There's the liti, if there is one. Section 8 is aposticha in its various configurations. Section 9 is now you let your servant depart in peace, and holy God, and the apolitikia, and holy God. And the end is whatever, wisdom, Father bless, he who is, Christ our God. And then the dismissal. And then other is other things. So let's start one by one. We're going to use, we may not use all of them. There might be a Sunday, a service where there aren't readings, so we won't be using, number 6 or whatever. But all of them have to have a beginning. So we start with Vespers 01. All right. So here we are, beginning, and we open it, and we're here. Because this is a Vespers, we could have had a hierarchical Vespers. If that was the case, we would use this section. If it was a Lenten weekday, that. If it was a Vesper of Liturgy, that. If it was Vespers with an Exandaria, we're able to do that, etc. So, but we're here at Vespers. And now we start with the logic. When movable cycle day is, and those are the days of Bright Week and the leaf taking of Easter. And we know that Bright Week and the leaf taking of Easter, days 72, 73, 72 through 77, and day 109 have a peculiar way of beginning the service. Christ is risen 12 times, there's no introductory psalm, etc. So if that's the case, then we have the code for that. And it's here. We don't have to go through each one, but here's the actor says priest. He'll say, instead of blessed is our God, he'll say, glory to the holy, consubstantial, life-giving, and undivided Trinity. Choir says, amen. And then, but we're not there. We're not going to do that. We're going to use the otherwise. And the otherwise is going to run all those things there. So it's going to run a section called anarxis. So let's look at anarxis. Anarxis means the priest, where he said, you can look at this and compare it on your DCS, but this is where this all comes from, where it says priest, blessed is our God, priest, blessed is our God, and amen, in parentheses. Understand? Yes. So where did these things come from? We could drill down, but if it's, it comes from the prayers file. So here's the prayers file, and it's got all kinds of, blessed is our God always, just blessed is our God, blessed is the kingdom, glory to the holy consubstantial, all things that are prayers, including anarxis, including exclamations, including petitions, all that kind of stuff. But we're just going to look at anarxis 01 there. Okay, got it. And then after that, we have a section called Introductory Psalm. And then I'll talk about this, and I think we'll be done for today. So the Introductory Psalm is the, Psalm, come let us worship, and Psalm 103, 104, right? So it says, when the movable cycle is anything from Thomas Sunday, so not Bright Week, but anything from Thomas Sunday till the day before the leave taking of Pascha, we know that we start the service with Christ is risen 3 times instead of come let us worship, correct? So we put that first. So if we can catch that, we'll catch those days first. And since it's, if it's that, then it says, do this, Christ is risen 3 times or whatever it is. But it's not that. So otherwise we move on. Actually, yeah, here it is. So it says, when the movable cycle is 78 through 108, do that, which is Christ is risen 3 times. Otherwise, do this. And for most of the year, it'll be the otherwise. And that's where we have come let us worship, come let us worship, come let us worship. That's here, one place. Does that make sense? Okay. All right, so we did introduction, and then we have a little rubric that says the people stand. And then we have some Psalm 103. I'm speeding through some of this. Here's the section for Psalm 103. And it takes us to the Psalter book itself in every language. Psalm 103, there's the title for Psalm 103. So when you see in the DCS Psalm 103, and then in English, it's going to say Psalm 103 parentheses 104. It doesn't do that in Greek because the Greek doesn't use that numbering system. And then we have the whole text of Psalm 103. It's using this key so that Psalm 103 will be presented as one unbroken paragraph. No verse sections. Psalm 103 is repeated in the Psalter, verse by verse, for when we want to use a particular verse, or if we were, when we want to present the psalm in, paragraphs of each, indented or whatever for each verse. So in this case, we want it to be just the text, and then we have those parts of the psalm that are repeated. The sun knows it's time for setting. You establish darkness. Oh Lord, how magnified. Okay, those are verses from the previous psalm. Where do we get those? Well, that's where I said that but when we don't want to repeat anything, we broke the rule here in the Psalter, because there are many cases when we need a particular psalm verse, and oftentimes it does not correspond with the biblical psalm verse, whether it's the length of it, how much of it, maybe it's just the first half, maybe liturgically we change the words a little bit, like when we were speaking of, his proclamation went into all the earth, for one apostle, and for 2 apostles, we say their proclamation went into all the earth, right? He's passing the fungus afton. I think in the actual psalm, it's there, plural. But when we're speaking of one apostle, liturgically, we like to say he. Well, where would we find that? We can't change the Psalter book itself. So we created another file that's called liturgical verses in each biblical language now. So liturgical verses. So here it's a quite a long file that has identified the verses of the Psalter that we need liturgically, not when we need it as a psalm, as a paragraph, but when we need it liturgically, here's where we'll find it, because we will then package it, truncate it, do whatever we do that it corresponds with the liturgical books. And here is where we have introductory psalm, end, verse 1, end, verse 2. And that's how we invoke it. So in those cases, when you do create your Psalter, you're going to have to also fill in the other files that are there. One is called liturgical verses. The other one is called Mineon verses. And the other one is called movable verses for the movable cycle.
Father?
Yes.
Unfortunately, I'm going to have to sign off. I have another appointment.
Oh, I understand. This is as far as I wanted to get today.